Our next speaker is Rūta Merkevičiūtė from Bank of Lithuania. She is head of EMI and Payment Institution Supervision. So welcome, Rūta, and we will start presenting in a moment.
So I would start. Hello, everyone. It's nice that Deloitte has invited me to share about, from supervisor point of view, about the best practices and challenges while reporting to Bank of Lithuania. So my aim is today you will see a lot of information about the fines, and Mindaugas was joking, it was alarming, but truly the fines what we impose sometimes is a good practice and best practice to learn from others. So that's my aim today to talk about. So having said that, let's start. So after the license is issued, welcome to regulated world. I always say that, and nobody said it will be easy to be regulated. And after the company is licensed, I guess after the first letter they get from us, they feel the vibe and the responsibility to be regulated. So when you enter the license world, you meet other peers, and we have them like in year 2000. At this quarter, 2020, quarter 2, we have already 120 licensed entities. And you see that the income from license activity are growing. The payment turnovers are also big ones. Like several years ago, if we looked at the scale at the companies who are working in Lithuania and who has the biggest turnovers, we could see only like Lithuanian investors like Paysera, maybe Lithuanian Post, other Perlas Finance. Now the ecosystem is really more interesting. There are more and more participants whose capital is coming not from Lithuania, the shareholders. And you see that in some places there are names that are not like Lithuanian based. So this is really the result of both our governmental institutions, the will to have a fintech hub in Lithuania. And I guess we could say that in terms of payments, of e-money and payment institution, they have this. So after you get a license, you get to this special among this 120 companies. And what you get from regulator is a letter. This is just a screenshot from a letter what we sent, then the license is issue, and we say congratulations and hello, the head of company. There is Bank of Lithuania, and we want you to remind as soon as you're licensed, you have to report for us. And of course, there are a lot of reporting to be done. For example, each quarter we have to submit financial data reports, AML reports. Then on case ad hoc requirements, there is operational incidents reports, IT and cybersecurity reports you have to provide yearly. Then the data on complaints of clients and other data you have to provide also yearly. There is another part is statistical data. So a lot of things to be done. Therefore, I guess sometimes it's now explainable why we ask when someone is licensed, do you have enough staff to comply with this regulation, to report us? Because what I want to say, and maybe at this point, sometimes it might see this reporting is just statistics. But truly, today I want to talk about how it looks like from regulators, supervisors' perspective. So the thing, this reporting requirements like financial data, ML data, IT and cybersecurity, it talks more about very earthy things. Financial data, it talks about your financial health. As a Bank of Lithuania, when we issue a license, we issue a warrant both to the society that you are reliable and financial sound. So it means by reporting to us, we can double check if your financial health as a doctor is good. AML data, IT cybersecurity data is needed to assess your AML IT cyber risk resilience. And by this data, we might say if you are really working towards this. The operational incidents data on complaints, they're also saying other things about you. For example, it says about your internal controls and compliance culture. One of the examples what I like to pose that truly even to submit reports on time, it shows that you as the company has some kind of compliance culture, because compliance comes first, the respecting the terms comes first. In terms, you know, sometimes the company is late, it's possible once, but if it's late more times, so it's talking for us also about internal controls in order, because, you know, the quarter reporting is already known, so the company has to be prepared. It also shows us about that clients' funds are saved all the time. The specificality of e-money and payment institution is that the funds are not protected by insurance scheme, deposit insurance scheme like banks. The funds are protected by separating it from company funds and by keeping it at credit institution. So this for us is very important, and both in European level, to ensure that these companies are really taking care of client funds. And then it whistles also on compliance in business conduct with the clients, especially the complaints that you get and the date of complaints that you submit. And of course, last but not least, if you are reliable participants in payment system. It's related both operational incidents of or strong customer authentication application, then open API requirements that requires you as a, for example, if you are e-money institution, you have to open up. So this kind of implementation, this reporting really makes us to have a picture of you as a company. And today I want to talk about some of them that is very important and practices that could be really made better. So when I talk about internal control, it's very, the notion is quite broad, but the thing is about reliability, adequate reliability of an entity. It's a process itself that ensures that financial and other information used both inside e-money and payment institution and for supervisory purposes or by third persons is reliable, adequate, and timely. So internal control addresses to all the spheres, not only, I don't know, AML or financial data. It talks about everything. If you have to submit data for us, financial data, it has not to be just the data itself on timely manner. It has to be reliable, and we have to really trust that this data is clear and the numbers are really reliable. And of course, internal controls whistles about the activity of e-money and payment institutions compliant with laws and institutional strategy. I will try to explain by some examples of the fines imposed. So we had last year restricted activities on one company. The deficiency on one hand might seem like a formal one. The company failed to submit us reporting data, financial reporting data for a couple of quarters. Of course, you know, sometimes from FinTech perspective, it means, well, so what, I might be late. But what it says to us from the point of view of Bank of Lithuania supervisor, that we can vouch on this kind of company. We can vouch that everything is fine because the company fails to submit data that really needs us to verify if the company still has the capital, if the client funds are still there. And based on this, that the company really failed to provide us financial reporting data, financial audit, the activities were restricted. So it whistles about lack of internal controls, not from, like I said, the AML side, but it whistles from just providing us financial reports. Another example is this year we had a revocation of license for one company who has a serious and systematic violations of legislation. The violations came not only from AML perspective, it was the violation came also the legal acts were violated that implements both client safeguarding requirements, both the reliable information, correct information submitted to Bank of Lithuania, and both that company provided services, licensed services, though it has not the proper license. The company was a payment institution, though it provided services as e-money institution. Then you have this kind of list on breaches of laws. This also names or faces that internal controls in the companies are not adequate, so we cannot rely on this kind of company in order for this company to work further in the market and that society can trust it. So these are the examples, and maybe, like I said, internal controls seems very broad, but really it's the most important thing, because it shows about all the system in the company that helps to comply to the system, to comply with the legal acts. And if it fails, so it means that the company fails and it's not able sometimes to be in the market, to be licensed. So just these two companies, I would say that this one really amended all the deficiencies, and now it's working. It has already activity going. This one, however, the breaches were so severe that the revocation of license had to be issued at this point. Another thing, when I talk about capital requirements, so it whistles about your financial health as a company. And what we, in the left hand, you see the equity ratio, the examples of this equity ratio. The capital equity ratio has to be all the time 1. And you see that some companies, they have even 32, some has 0.9. On the one hand, you might ask 0.9, it's almost 1, but it's not 1. It's even not very good to have 1, because it means it doesn't have a buffer, and you are here to be ill at one point if we talked about financial health. So usually what we require and what we expect that companies and their managers, they have to forecast the performance of e-money and payment institution and plan activities in a manner consistent with their revenues and costs incurred in the past. So it means that you should not keep your capital ratio just above 1. You have to have a buffer, and you have to plan that this buffer might be eaten by a cost. And the objective should not be solely to cover the minimum equity requirement. So at this point, we are very, both the health in COVID perspective is very important for us. So the financial health in the fintech sector is very important of us. So any kind of discrepancy in equity ratio, we bring to our to fines or some other taking other measures. And this is the example that the last quarter we had some companies, like 4 companies that were in breach of lacking of capital, some from 4,000 to 77,000. And it was, how to say, reported as a violation of laws. Some of them, they had only that we publicly announced this kind of violation. We want to get the market used, as this is really important. But if this kind of company would have the second violation, it would not be end with only public report. So this is a thing that sometimes the company tend to miss. But from point of regulator point of view, both the point from the trust of the customers that you are healthy in terms of financial health, it's very important. Another thing that I already talked about, safeguarding requirements of client funds. The concept, like I said, of e-money and payment institution is so important in terms that they have to have the measures both to safeguard clients' funds. The requirements is usually that you can choose one of the following methods, like funds must be deposited in a separate account in a credit institution or central bank, invest in secure, liquid, low-risk assets, or cover the funds by insurance policy. The thing is that the practice is that almost 70 or 80% of the client funds are separated, kept in separate accounts. We have no really or almost no insurance policy coverage because they are costly. And there are some invested in secure, liquid, low-risk assets, but it's used mostly by big companies who has like big sums of client funds, and over the day, over the time, it's not used in like over the month, and all the time it's some kind of sum is not used. I mean that the client doesn't use or keep the wallets, so it's a possibility to then to invest these funds in secure, liquid, low-risk assets. So I would like to point attention about the separation that account in a credit institution and some examples how this kind of thing was breached. Some companies, they say that I feel that, you know, everything is fine if I keep the client's funds somewhere else, like in another e-money institution. But the PSD2, the Payment Service Directive, the European Union attributed that you have to keep your funds only credit institutions or central banks, because they feel at that time the credit institutions are more reliable. So in case you want to keep anyone else, it's not really compliant with the laws. Why it's very important? Because there is the amount of customer funds held by e-money and payment institutions is constantly growing. Like you said, like you see in 2016, we have 74 million euros client funds held. Now we have 500 million. The total amount of executed payment transaction is even bigger. It's 16.5 billion euros. So what it means that these kind of sums are going going out in the companies, and some of the clients' funds are left for a longer time because customers don't use. And there is some examples as we see that it's one of the most important requirements for e-money institution. There are a couple of companies who were fined for improper segregation of customer funds. And I would like just show some examples. What's the discrepancies? So one of the company, they had it customer funds held with electronic money and payment institution registered in other EU member state. So the breach was about that they don't safeguard client funds in credit institution because the legal framework, it requires to have credit institution instead. And only the funds held in credit institution have this kind of safeguard or safeguard under the law, that in case of bankruptcy of e-money payment institution, this kind of the debts that follow the e-money institution cannot be covered from this bank account, and only the account held in credit institution. But sometimes we have companies that hold the funds, customer funds in credit institutions, but they are not really declaring to the credit institution that it's client funds. They are opening the bank account in name of their institution, like e-money institution or payment institution. So it's also not, there is no proper safeguarding, because the thing is that there is like basic two requirements, that you have to open a bank account in a credit institution and have to implement a proper protection of these funds. And the proper protection of these funds is the clear declaration of the status of customer funds. and establishment of special provisions in agreement concluded with credit institutions. So the thing is that then you come to the bank, you have to vocally say we need a contract that says that it is that there is held the client's funds, and in case of some kind of bailiffs come and say they want to arrest my funds, you cannot turn client funds in order to cover my debts. So this is the most important thing, like two factors, like to hold in a credit institution and then to implement the proper safeguards, and the proper safeguards are related really to vocalizing that is the client funds account, that no recovery based on the company's debts might be done. Another thing that I want to talk about the risk, I guess it's related to AML risk. When we talked about some years ago, we could saw that most of the clients that are at e-money and payments institutions are from Lithuania. Now we have a map of top 50 client citizenship residents based on payments value. And we see that geographic distribution are really wide. Our e-money and payment institution have clients all around the world. What I mean, the payments comes from these clients from even USA, even Australia, New Zealand, China, Asia region, and coming from them both sides. This potentially raises a lot of AML risks, and there are like the risk that is indicated while performing investigation. What we see is really that sometimes companies, they improperly determine the origin of legal person source of funds. Why it's important to determine the legal person source of funds is really to have flags in order in your system, in order you would see that there's some kind of risk at this point, or maybe this client is so risky that you cannot accept because the origin is ungrounded, or maybe you have to file the STR to FIU and help them to prevent any kind of false or bad money coming to our financial system. Another thing that is about very important risk is anonymity in served products. It's usually related, or as example, virtual asset market. If your clients are in virtual asset market, you have to be sure that they really know their clients who are using virtual assets, and they determine its identity. Another risk that we see and company fails to do is an ineffectiveness of transaction monitoring, failure to implement technical measures. For example, sometimes they have really little flags in order to operate, or too much flags that they stop all the operation, are not having enough hands to proper address this red flags. And the fourth thing is underestimating the risk itself, product offered, customers, cash flows, and corridors. And this is also very important in combating and having AML risk resilience at the company. So as a result, we have some fines issued, and maybe the thing is all related to AML. I would say that these fines, like maybe this one was quite a big one, but the fines itself, I would say the anti-money law, they say that you can impose 5 million fines. So then we think about 1,000, talk about 1,000, it's not so much comparing what the AML laws let us do and how other countries fine their market participants, banks or other e-money institutions. So these are the fines really that not big, but of course, if in case the market is not changing, we will have to make it bigger to show or to send the message. Because the thing is not about, for us as a regulator, we have no interest to fine a company really. We have an interest that the company would comply and the market would comply. And it's very sometimes from our point of view regretful that the companies that our market, they don't learn from others' mistake, and then they themselves have to really feel this kind of fines. So I just wanted to show these are some last fine imposed. These fines really more or less some companies has already had the measures introduced in the company in order to address these deficiencies, but with some of the companies we are still working. So at the end, I would say, and we'll share the image of scales. We as regulators, we have always have a balance. We need to warrant that fintech development is warranted throughout risk assessment. It means that I understand from fintech perspective, it's always sometimes the first business that you have to, to get the incomes and to get the benefit from and to do the business. But the license is about, and the grant of the license that said about your something to the customers says that you have to have this kind of balance on compliance. And the thing that as the regulators and our strategy is really to make this compliance culture as a new normal at fintech industry, because without it, there would not be any product, would not be our jurisdiction as Lithuania would suffer. And I guess the main message is really compliance culture first for all the fintechs. So many thanks for the attention, and I hope you have some questions.
Thank you very much, Rūta. Yes, we do have a question from the participant. Rokas is asking, what is Bank of Lithuania's view on providing payment services to customers based outside of European Economic Area countries?
What is our view? Like you said, there are customers who are from this kind of countries. It's not forbidden. The main thing is really to determine what kind of risk this kind of customer bears, and if the company is really able to mitigate the risks. Another part is very important, I guess, from this non-EU country, if by providing this kind of services to these clients, you are not really working in that country and you don't have to be licensed in that country. So sometimes it's another part that the company has to assess.
Okay, thank you for the answer. A question from my side. From your presentation, I saw two keynotes, one related to ML, another related to protection and separation of customers' funds. What do you see other areas emerging as possible issues? And the related question, does Bank of Lithuania plans any themed audits or inspections in that regard?
So every year we are thinking of different thematic reviews. What we can do publicly, we publish. Of course, our thematic reviews or inspection will go with AML. That's whatsoever. What we have concerns is really the governance and the competence of the managers. Therefore, what we have introduced during the licensing process, some interviews with the managers, and we want to address this field more importantly, maybe with the thematic reviews, maybe in another part, maybe by really bringing up managers to the responsibility of, in case we have a breach here, so we will address also to the managers, because the thing is that we sometimes feel that the manager doesn't feel responsible what's happening to the company, and it's very, very, how to say, not very good. So we are thinking about the ways how to bring the managers really thinking about hand in hand with the company, with the compliance, and that making them care about that. So I guess this would be the biggest shift, I guess, assessing the internal governance and qualifications of the managers.
Okay, thank you. Last question from my side. With the increasing number of fintech players and also technology advancement, Bank of Lithuania has stepped forward and showed initiatives in terms of GovTech and RegTech for creating tools and various means to improve regulation. But what do you see fintech companies can expect in terms of supervision in 3 years from now?
So what we are trying to do, like already you said, that we want to make the reporting more easier. We think not about the bad thing, how to supervise, but how to supervision to make compliance costs, how to say, not so big for fintech industry. So in 3 years, what we expect, maybe we will have this possibility to pull the information from the companies, not by them to filling the reports, but really to pull that we could pull the information data for initial source. So this kind of regulator, supervisor field would be more trustworthy. And in 3 years, I guess what we expect really to have this understanding the market, what the compliance culture, it's very important. We don't want to be a new Malta or a new other country that has a bad reputation in this. So we will work with companies and who are willing to have the same goal, to that the Lithuania would be attributed to really like to see like experience and the compliance culture worthy country. So we will work hand in hand with these companies.
Thank you. I see 2 questions also coming from the participants. One is, what is the average period to grant a license for an EMI, starting from the newcomers meeting? And another question, also one of the issues that EMIs are facing, that banks do not want to open accounts. So already known one. What needs to be done to change the situation from EMI perspective?
Okay, so maybe I will start with the last question of what needs to be done. So we know that it's very important for e-money and payment institution to have a bank account. It's very important to diversify the places where you keep your client funds, because you have to assess this. So what we initiated in Lithuania, we had a position on opening bank account at credit institutions, that they say for banks that you have to assess each e-money and payment institution individually. The thing that they are e-money and payment institution is not grounding the fact, how to say, a reliable fact for you not to open their account or close the account. So what is needed to be done from e-money and payments perspective is really to talk with the banks and to show that their AML procedures are proper, they are working there, and to as open as possible. And only in this place and following the rules that the bank says. Because what we see in the bank reports, they usually, the e-money and payment institution, they breach the rules that they had concluded with the bank, or doing some other things. And of course, then you breach something that you agreed, there is no trust on the side of the bank. So transparency, following the rules, is the main key factors for entering to this relationships with the banks. As regards the first question from newcomers, it depends. Newcomers program, it's about just meeting the regulator, and it's up to you when you file the submission application for e-money and payment institution. But if we talk from the submission point of view, what we introduced, that it's not about the term, but what we introduced, that like the last comment round that faces you is the third one. What it means, what we held only 3 rounds of comments to your application, and in case in the third round we still feel that you are lacking to become an e-money and payment institution, we provided this information for you. So I guess what we came over shifted to this, that we want to manage your expectation as e-money and payments as an applicant, and to provide with the answer no or yes in as soon as possible. So it might take, depending on you really, it might take 3 months, it might take 6 months, it might take but we are not trying to make it maybe longer to provide you an answer, but 6 months. But 6 months, it doesn't mean you get a license. It says maybe it means that you will get no or yes at this point.
Okay, Rūta, thank you very much.